Hey guys, welcome back. This is Llama of Llama Paints Minis, and if you remember a short while ago, I did a video on non-metallic metal. It was very basic. I used just a couple of colors and a very simple technique on a very small model. In fact, it was the blade of this little hobgrot from the Auric War Clan's Age of Sigmar. It was effective, it was quick, took just a few minutes. Well, now I'm going to show you how we can step that up to do, let's say, a level 2 non-metallic metal. We're going to take a bigger surface, the axe blade of this creepy guy here. He is one of the Cankerborn, which is an earth demon of Nurgle. He's from the Warhammer Quest Darkwater box set, also usable in the Maggot Kingdom Nurgle Age of Sigmar army. We're not going to focus on any of the other details besides the metal blade itself. And what we're going to also focus on is how to use texture or visual noise to get the effect we want. This is another relatively simple technique, but it will push your non-metallic metal game even farther. And for this, I'm just going to use velvets from the Chimera Velvet primary set. So we've got black, we've got the white, because for non-metallic silver, which is what we're going to focus on here, you really want to make a grayscale color. And we've got phthalo blue, so we can tint it just a little bit. And of course, our cold yellow, which is one of my favorites, for stepping up in highlights. So we'll just get those arranged on the palette here. I'm not going to do anything to pre-dilute them. I'm not going to mix them with any mediums. And I'm not going to use any heavy-bodied paint. I've just got my great big size 2 arrowhead brush here. But first I'm going to grab this one. This is a really crappy beat-up brush, and I'm going to use it to mix my paints because I want my Chimera brush to stay nice and pretty. So here I'm just going to mix a very basic gray scale using black and white. Now we want to do this one showing any kind of steel, iron, a silver. You want to kind of be grayscale and then just add a touch of color to your liking. I'm going with a little bit more of a cool tone, and that's why I've got the phthalo blue. But I will also mix some warm tones. You'll see that on the palette, so that while we're going up in value, we can go warm or cold. And this just gives your non-metallic metal a little bit of nuance in the effect. Now, when I mentioned earlier that we were going to do visual noise, what I'm referring to there is, the types of visual information are typically color, contrast, lighting, and texture. We are going to focus on texture, meaning I'm going to use a series of dots, lines, scratches, and then a couple of special effects that we'll bring in later, so that to the eye of the person looking at it, it will read as though it's blended and read as though it's metal. Since he happens to be a representative of Nurgle, then we're going to lean it into some other directions, but that'll be another video. So here you can see I'm just mixing on the palette a full range from dark to light, both cold direction and warm direction. Now, you don't have to do that. You can just keep it grayscale if you want. When walking through this exercise, go ahead and grab yourself a figure and follow along if you want. And you'll see that this is a pretty quick process. And when you're in full control of it, it'll be hard to ever go back. So this is the most exciting part, where I am literally just mixing colors on the palette. I'm sure all of you know how to do this. And I'm using a beat up brush so I don't beat up my good brushes. Now I've got the good brush here. It was like magic, it just sort of appeared. And so I'm going to grab a color that I want to start with. And the first thing I'm going to do is just block in my dark tone, my dark gray. And so I'll grab our Cankerborn fella here, and I'll come up to the flat part of the axe head, right there, and I will just block this in. Now, the primer I used here, I just laid down a sort of base coat of a medium gray, and then did a zenithal hit with like a gray sear color. I, however, was impatient, and I did not wait for the medium gray to dry first and just sprayed the light color over, so that's why it looks kind of speckled, but it was very thin. It won't really affect the outcome here. We're fine. Just something so that your paint can grab on. Now again, I am just using the velvets here. These are the Chimera Velvets, which are advertised as an acrylic ink, but really I feel like they're just a fluid texture paint with a slightly satin finish. And the more I've been using them as my daily drivers, the more I'm starting to think they can kind of do everything. And you'll even see here, these end up with a little bit of a matte finish at the end, and I think that comes down to just how you load the brush and how thinly you apply the paint. But you can see how it's loaded on the brush there. I explained in my previous video how we want to load these on the brush. And now I'm jumping already to a light color. Because all I want to do, if you remember from our video with the Hobgrot, is I want to block in my planes of light. I'm just going to sketch in where the light is, where the shadow is. I'm not going to worry about them being blended or smooth. I'm not going to build them up slowly from dark to light. I sketched in a dark spot, and now I'm sketching in a light spot. Now, you can go either direction with the sharp end of a blade, like in this case, the axe head here. And what I mean by either direction, you can either sketch the light in with vertical lines, or like here, I'm kind of doing horizontal lines from right to left across the surface of the blade. Now that will show at the end. If you choose to do vertical lines, then stick with vertical lines throughout the project. If you're going to do horizontal lines, stick with horizontal lines throughout the project. If you go one against the other, it will kind of look awkward at the end when it finishes, unless you are specifically creating texture. And I'll show you the difference in a little bit. And so now since I've pre-mixed all of my tones, I can now jump back and forth to any of them I want. And I can start here framing in some texture. So you see I loaded it towards just the tip of the brush. Didn't add any water to it or anything. And now I can use that very sharp tip. These brushes are very good, by the way. The Kolinsky Sable ones from Chimera just are absolutely top of the line. I've got a very sharp tip on it here, and now I am just drawing random scratches, dots, lines, no rhyme or reason. I'm not picking any particular thing. I'm just having it kind of make sense with the shape of the axe head. And since this guy, if you want to become a little bit of a lore nerd, is representative of the Nurgle faction, they don't take very good care of their equipment. They let it get rusty, they let it get beat up. They sharpen the end, of course, but they value growth. They value bacteria, they value viruses and pustules and funguses, and so their blades are in pretty rough shape. Now, the sculptors, the designers at Games Workshop, they have put a lot of those details into the blade already. Some people prefer that as it kind of gives them a guideline, and some don't. Some people like to draw that in themselves. Here, I'm just picking random directions and doing lines and dots. The key there is keep them small, keep them fine, keep them sharp. You have to remember this axe head is supposed to be about 3 foot across. So on that tiny scale, as you can see, that axe head's about the size of my thumbnail. Those lines, those scratches should be very small. So that's why I'm using a brush with a very sharp tip. And now here I'm coming back to our plane of light, and I'm just going to make an even smaller one that's brighter. You'll see it's kind of all the rage now with non-metallic metal to put in multiple waves or bands of light across a sharp surface. That's what I'm doing here. It's very effective. It's very believable. You just want to make sure that they're not all the same. If they're all the same width and all the same value, then the eye will start to it'll look funny to the eye, right? So now here I'm inserting more scratches, dots, doing a little bit of edge highlighting, right? Because we want to show that this is a sharp object. But I'm really, to this point, not doing much more than I did on the little Hobgrot. This is just a much bigger surface, so I want to inject a little more information, right? A little more of that texture to fill an otherwise wide open space. Now, you don't have to. You could just make it perfectly smooth, like maybe this Cankerborn really takes care of his axe and he polishes it every day and washes it and disinfects it and whatever. But mine's not. His is pretty rough. In fact, I don't even know where he gets this. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Vashtor exists in Age of Sigmar as well, and he crafts him a new one every so often. But, yeah, nothing surprising here, just going back and forth. And so after I create these lines and scratches, and you'll notice I blacked in the sort of fleshy detail at the back of the axe because the blade sort of melds with the handle and it's got some sort of stretched flesh across it. I will paint those in some gross vibrant colors later. But I just blacked it in so you could better see the axe head. And now here what I'm doing is I'm just using a glaze of the colors that I've mixed on the palette. And to make a glaze, I simply add a little bit of water to it. But the key is you want to load the brush very lightly. You don't want much paint and liquid in the brush or it will turn into a wash, and that's not what we're going for here. If you have any questions about how to make a glaze, drop a comment below and I'd be happy to make a video showing you different types of glazes. But I'm just glazing in whatever the last color was that I highlighted with to sort of make some of those lines and scratches fade a little bit into the axe head itself. Because they were pretty harsh and you can leave them that way and it would certainly be effective. The eye will go a long ways to blend it visually. But what I want to do is I'm blurring those a bit, just going a little bit neater, another step farther than I did with that Hobgrotten non-metallic metal level 1, if you want to call it that. I'm going a little bit farther here because the transparent nature of the paint will still allow us to see some of those scratches and lines later on, but they'll be faded just enough to appear blended, and so you kind of get the best of both worlds. It'll look blended, but then you'll be rewarded when you inspect farther and see these textures built up one over the other. People will think you spent hours on it. Really doesn't take very long, as you're seeing here. This is pretty much real time. So now I've done a glaze pass to sort of blur those, and now I'm coming back and doing more scratches and dots, just like that. And you can reinforce some of the same ones you did before, like on that crack towards the back of the axe blade where it meets the handle. That is a sculpted detail. That's one Games Workshop put in there. So I have reinforced that. And then the edges, of course. But the rest of them, I'm just creating new lines and dots now. Different place than I did before. Because again, we'll have this visual information, this noise, this texture build up. Do this, glaze over it, do it again, glaze over it. And that might sound like a lot of work, but really each pass takes like a minute or two. And you can go as far with this as you want, or you can just do it with one pass. And you can see as each one builds up a little bit brighter, the value comes up a little bit more. It's starting to read more like metal, right? Now here we're starting to look like it might be a stone or a dark steel. Now there you just saw me put 3 dots into these spots in the axe blade, and I'll get to those in a little bit. It's these like pock marks or pustules or spots where the blade is eroded from Nurgle corruption, right? And I at first wasn't going to do anything special with them, but I decided to add a little bit of effects that I'll show later. The risk with adding effects like that is if you, say, make rust and you have it like drain down the blade, which you can do, which I did, you'll then have vertical lines going against horizontal lines. And like I mentioned earlier, that can visually look a little weird. I did it because I don't care, and because it's Nurgle and everything about Nurgle looks a little weird. But yeah, no mystery or magic here. I'm just going back and forth with my texture and my glazes, and I'm just coming up in value a little bit each time. So this one you can see is much closer to white. And I'm picking out some edges and then just making new lines and dots in different places. And then I will glaze with that last color over it to soften the marks a little bit. Now we will still want some of those marks to show sharp, but we'll come back at the very end and do some specular highlights. And of course those are just like the final glistening or sparkling little dots there. Now at this stage you could absolutely leave it just like that. You could leave it grayscale, and if you were doing an axe head for, I don't know, anything else that wasn't Nurgle-y, you could leave it just like that. I of course will insert some effects because it is Nurgle, but I'll release that in another video. Another effect you could insert, of course, was to show sky and earth reflecting off of the shiny parts of the blade. There I'm doing kind of another glaze pass, and just with each glaze, as I go up in value, I'm just glazing a smaller and smaller area. Because remember, a big thing with the effect of non-metallic metal is not a technique. It's not even really the colors you choose. It's the effect. It's the result. And so what we want to create is that illusion of sharpness and contrast in a short space. You want to jump from dark to light pretty quickly. And so I am choosing smaller and smaller planes of light each time. My glaze is covering a smaller and smaller area each time. And then I'm doing little specular or dot highlights to make it really look shiny. Now, this video, we're, 15 minutes in. My actual painting time for this axe head was probably about 35 minutes to do it to this stage. I had to stop a couple times for something, but yeah, about 30-35 minutes of actual paint time. And then you end up with something that looks like this. And again, I only used the colors from the primary set of the Chimera Velvets. Of course, if you would like those, you can get them at Dracoya.com. You can use my name and the number 10, that's Llama 10, to save 10%. And just like with primary acrylic paints, you can mix any color. You can do everything with these that you could do with acrylic paint, but they flow so smooth. Here I'm just reinforcing the lightest plane where the blade is sharp and where it meets the axe head itself. And just like that, you've got a more advanced or sort of stage 2 non-metallic metal. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you give it a try. Share any of your experiences with me on my Instagram at Llama Paints Minis. And until next time, paint brave, guys.